Welcome to the Retool Eval Pre-Fit Assessment course. The pre-fit assessment is a key differentiator for your business that sets your fitting service apart from the competition. The pre-fit assessment is what affords you the opportunity to gather information about the uniqueness of your rider and takes a lot of the guesswork out of the on-bike fitting steps. All information should be documented using the Assessment tab in the V7 software. Before the fitter starts adjusting a rider's position on the bike, they must understand the rider's unique attributes. First, the fitter should interview the rider. Start with a conversation that will inform the fitter about the rider's goals, desired experience, and injury history. Having a thorough understanding of the rider will guide the fitting process and begin to establish a trusting relationship with the fitter and the store. The most important question to ask during every fit is, what is your goal for today's fit? After the interview, the fitter will take the rider through the physical evaluation. This indispensable part of the process will identify the rider's unique structures and limitations, strength, and flexibility. This is the foundation for why on-bike adjustments are made. Here are some terms to know by now. For consistency, fitters should all be using the same words when documenting the assessment. Varus angles away, valgus angles towards, and neutral is no angulation. Mild, moderate, and significant are simply a small, medium, and large amount. The important thing to remember during the assessment, the rider is not there to hear about how messed up they are. Use these terms to sound professional and not come across as negative or judgmental. The first assessment measures the rider's ischial tuberosities, or sit bone width. Sit bone width is used to suggest a saddle size. The DSD must be used with either the iPad app or the Match Tower. The computing power for the pressure mapping device is in the computer, not in the device. Using the iPad, log in and move through the questions with your rider. Next, properly set up the rider with their knees at 90 degrees and back straight. Follow the capture instructions on the iPad. Finally, document the sit bone width. You can stop there, or you can continue on and show your rider the saddle recommendations. Ask if they have had this measured before and if they want this saved in their passport. The forefoot angulation assessment looks at the rider's feet individually, determining the type of angulation, remembering that most riders have varus forefeet. The fitter will also assign a degree to the angulation using the forefoot measuring device, or the FMD. The information gathered here will inform the use of wedges for optimal hip-knee-foot alignment during the fit. First, start by properly setting up your rider on the bench with the rider on their knees and their feet pointing back towards you. Hover over the rider's feet so you can best determine the type of alignment. Use your hands to locate the flat part across the heel and the angle across the toes. Finally, use the FMD to determine the degree of angulation. Do this on both the left and the right. The rear foot structure assessment first identifies the type of ankle alignment by looking at the relative position of the ankle bones to the heel. A foot that collapses will show as valgus, while more rigid feet will show as neutral or varus. The information gathered here will help determine foot support during the fit. The second part of the rear foot structure assessment determines the rider's neutral arch height. Neutral because the rider is seated and unweighting their arches. Using the DFD or archometer, the rider rests their unweighted feet on the device to see the amount of contact the foot has with the pressure or heat pad. A high arch has minimal pressure, or the smallest imprint on the device, usually with a very narrow connection along the outside edge of the foot, sometimes not even connecting at all for the highest of arches. Low arches leave a fat imprint that almost fully connects the forefoot to the heel. Everything else in between is a medium or moderate arch height. The fitter uses this information to suggest an appropriate size footbed during the fit. We start with the rider standing. The fitter will get down low to observe the ankles from behind each foot. They will align with the rider's individual feet. Next, they will align the ankle bones up to the heel bones. They can also return a valgus ankle up to neutral to see the difference. For the second part of the assessment, the rider will be seated with their weight back on their seat and their feet just resting on the pad. Here you can see the gap underneath their arch. Now ask the rider to move their feet off of the device so you can see the imprint. Match the imprint to a low, medium, or high arch contour. You can also show the rider how much collapse they have by asking them to stand on the device. Then move their feet away and notice the larger imprint. Before beginning this assessment, the fitter needs to tell the rider what's going to happen first. For example, say that, "For this next assessment, I'll be placing my hands on top of your hips. Is that okay?" And this brings up an important point. The fitter should always be respectful and should make the rider aware of the assessments prior to touching them. Maintain a firm and deliberate grasp when touching the rider to prevent any awkward or uncomfortable moments. Now back to the assessment. Locate the top of the iliac crest. This is the very top of the hip, well above the belt line. Feel and look to see if one side is higher. This assessment identifies possible hip and/or leg length asymmetry. An easy way for the fitter to help locate the top of the hip is to have the rider find their belly button and then trace around to each side and place their hands on top of the pelvic bones. Then the fitter can simply say, "Now I will replace your hands with mine," before stepping behind the rider to assess their hips. It will be easiest for the fitter to take a knee or squat down to be at the rider's hips, then determine if one side is higher than the other. It is not necessary to assign a degree to this assessment even though the option is there in the software. At least document left or right as high or neutral if they are even. In the forward spinal flexion assessment, the rider will bend forward with their legs straight and knees locked out. How much the rider's pelvis rotates forward is an indication of hamstring mobility. Greater flexibility in the back of the rider's legs, primarily their hamstrings, will allow for more forward rotation. Riders that can rotate further forward can possibly achieve lower handlebar positions on the bike. More limited riders will need handlebars closer to level with their saddle. Prompt the rider to lock out their knees, bending at the waist until they feel tightness at the top of their hamstrings. Then tell the rider to relax the weight of their body and hang their arms and head down. Now place your hand on the rider's sacrum and note the sacrum angle. If the angle is level to the horizon or below, the rider has unlimited hamstring range of motion. The more the angle rises above horizontal, the more limited the hamstring range of motion is. For the hamstring range of motion assessment, the rider is laying on their back on the table, totally relaxing their legs. The fitter will raise each leg to the initial point of tension and document to the nearest degree each leg's result. Hamstring range of motion affects the rider's ability to roll their pelvis forward and reach down to the handlebars. It also affects the rider's knee angle through the bottom of the pedal stroke. Have the goniometer positioned next to the rider on the table. Firmly lift the rider's leg until you see a bend at the knee, the quad activate, feel tension or resistance in the leg, or the opposite leg moves away from the table. Then use the goniometer to measure the angle from the ankle, the lateral malleolus, to the hip at the greater trochanter. Note the degrees left and right. Again, during the hip range of motion assessment, the rider will lay flat on their back and fully relax their leg muscles. The fitter will grasp the back of the rider's knee and raise the leg until they feel tension. Hip range of motion affects the rider's ability to reach the handlebars at the top of the pedal stroke. Have the goniometer positioned next to the rider on the table. Grasp the rider's leg behind the knee and press until there is noticeable resistance in the leg or the other leg is lifting off the table. Use the goniometer to measure the angle from the knee to the hip at the greater trochanter. Note the degrees left and right. To assess the rider's ankle range of motion, the rider is laying down on the table with straight legs. The fitter will instruct the rider to point their toes all the way away and towards themselves. This shows the rider's range of motion in plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Limitations in ankle mobility can affect how a rider drives their heels or points their toes through the pedal stroke. With the rider on the table, Simply have the rider move their feet away from them and note if there are any limitations left and right, and have the rider move their feet towards them and note again if there are any limitations between the left and the right. When performing the 1/3 knee bend assessment, the rider will stand, preferably unassisted, on each leg and perform 1/3 of a squat. First, watch the foot for stability. Is it holding still or moving? Then as the rider bends, follow and note the movement of the knee. This unsupported movement can indicate how the rider's knee will track when they're on the bike. As the rider is squatting, watch the hips and upper body. Note if the hips stay level or if they drop to the raised leg side. Also watch if the rider's torso stays straight or if it twists as the rider dips down into the squat. Hip drop indicates a lack of stability in underlying glute musculature. Torso movement indicates lack of stability in core musculature. With hands on hips, have the rider squat on the right leg with the left knee bent. As the rider squats partway, note if the knee moves in, out, or stays straight over the foot. Squat again and note if the rider's hips remain level or dip to the lifted leg side, and if the rider's torso twists or remains straight. Repeat the assessment on the other side. I know that the ranges of motion and structures that we just learned about in the pre-fit assessment can seem a little overwhelming at first. But with a fair amount of practice at home or in your fit studio, you'll be able to easily identify these ranges of motion and these structures so that you can make the best support decisions and adjustments for your riders once you get them on the bike. We will learn about those on-bike fitting steps in the next modules.